Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Ash Vatz. He is head of cybersecurity at Alight. Welcome, Ash.
Thank you, Pete. Super excited to be here. Thanks for your time on Monday morning. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being on as well. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So my background was computer science, and I always thought I wanted to be a developer. But when I started doing some internship in a co-op, I realized that there's more to this field than just being a developer. Obviously, I used to do a whole lot of development back in the day, but then I started looking for loopholes in that area. What really interested me was the pen test from that perspective. When I was, again, in the dev mindset, I realized that I think penetration tests from application code is going to be something that I really want to explore. Thankfully, I started my career with PwC, and that made me realize that that's not just one aspect of pen test. There's too many things out there when it comes to threat and vulnerability management. So I broadened my horizon from pen test to TVM, to slowly realizing that that's not the end of the world. That's one good thing about the Big Four, about PwC, is that the experience you get over there is just going to be enormous. It's basically like you're putting in dog years, because you're going to be learning. One project, and then from one project to another project, which is going to be totally different market, totally different industry, totally different client, and it just helps you keep you on your toes. But started my career as a pen tester at PwC to started doing a whole lot of strategy work again at PwC. What really interested me was, we've all seen a lot of breaches in the past, right? We've all seen a lot of security incidents. Going there as part of the security strategy team to just understand why something happened, and then planning how to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future, that takes a certain type of skill set. Not only are you focusing on the tactical day-to-day, but also focusing on what was not impacted. How do you protect that? How do you keep it protected, right? And then what was impacted? What are the tactical steps for this week, next week, and also 1 year from now? How would you go around that? So really thank all the experience that I got from that perspective at PwC. And then from there, somehow got involved in M&A. So I spent some years with RSM, to focusing primarily on due diligence when it comes to cybersecurity. And the funny thing, Pete, is that we had to sell due diligence as part of deals back in 2018, 2019, which was kind of ironical, because you wouldn't buy a house without doing your inspection. Why would you buy a company without doing all sorts of due diligence, which includes cybersecurity, right? It just kind of amazes me. But I think it was really interesting to work with a lot of individuals who are very financially motivated and not necessarily understand cybersecurity problems and things like that. But educating them was primarily the reason that I really enjoyed that job. And building that team and building that skill set amongst my team, where you only get a certain number of days or hours, days if you're lucky when it comes to due diligence, but hours. You're working mostly with the non-technical people when you're buying and selling the company. So that was a really good experience in the M&A, or working with private equities and making sure that they understand cyber due diligence, making sure that they do cyber due diligence, and if they're buying a company to merge with the rest of the portfolio, what does that look like in terms of the security maturity, and how would it make sense to merge them in the future? That was some really good experience. And then from there, Pete, I jumped into Guardian Life, where essentially I was doing two different things. It was more of a technology role than a security role, and I appreciate the opportunity I got with my CIO, focusing on the technology problems and not just the security problems. And I'm sure anybody in the security world will understand that generally speaking, the CISOs and the BISOs, and my role was a BISO role, reporting into the CIO, and you have a perspective on, hey, you want to solve all these problems from security, application code, or whatever the case may be. But from the CIO's perspective, who owns the remediation of those items, they have to balance the business needs, they have to balance the client needs, and they have to balance the security needs. So it's not like all the 100 items that you want them to work on is going to be interjected into the roadmap. It's a little bit of a art that the CIOs have to do to make sure that, quote unquote, everybody is happy, and clients and the business and security problems are all adjusted in a way that makes sense for business to be secure, but also for business to exist in the future and the clients to buy that. Then from there, Pete, my absence business got bought over by Alight, so I became part of Alight a little over a year ago at this point, or maybe a year ago at this point, and the focus has changed a little bit. I am still responsible for being the BISO for two organizations within Alight at this point, Absence and Retiree Health. But my primary responsibility, I would say, is the strategy bit at Alight. There were a lot of things that we have done in the past, that I have done in the past, which has been more on the strategy side. And sometimes when you have a firm like Alight, which is a lot of M&As in the past, that's how Alight has been able to grow, is through mergers and acquisitions. It's possible that not everybody is integrated, not everybody has the same security maturity, and not everybody has essentially the same security roadmap within Alight, like all these different businesses. So that's where my CSO saw the need to plug me in and essentially understand the current baseline and how would you take it to the next level of security maturity at Alight. So really enjoying the role, super excited to work with this exceptional talent, and also want to talk about if I was to grow this team, which I'm planning to grow this team from information security strategy perspective, what are the current challenges that I'm facing? I know Pete, you and I have had some conversations on that in the past. It's not easy to find the right talent who, at least from where I'm sitting, at least from my perspective, that will help us from strategy, which is a lot of security pillars that you need to understand, not just one, right? If I was a pen tester back in the day, 15, 20 years ago, was only focused on one thing. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for somebody who understands pen tests, doesn't need to do the pen test, but also is able to understand TDE or disk level encryption or application level encryption or tokenization. So it's a skill set that I am really interested in, and finding it hard to find those individuals.
Yeah, I think you highlighted a common thing that we kind of see in the industry. Back when you were a pen tester, you were able to go step outside the box of a pen tester and go further and talk about remediation and strategy and stuff like that. I think a lot of pen testers just want to get in there, hack the thing, and then move on to the next thing to break, but they don't necessarily have any interest in the business aspect of it and making sure everything's back up and running. So yeah, it's certainly a rare breed like yourself to be able to come up through that and do more strategy after having been, that technical person, boots on the ground. Obviously, we talk a lot about the talent gap in the field, and I guess in your mind, how would you conceptualize the talent gap? And would you say that it's real or imaginary, or what does it look like, do you think?
I think it's 100% real. We've been looking for, and I'll just give you a couple examples. We've been looking for a individual who can help us build a team from scratch, which is, again, focusing on the strategy side. And I've talked to a lot of individuals for this role, and then they all bring something to the table. And I'm not saying I'm looking for somebody who has every possible security skill set and then be the end all be all and knows everything and all those different things. No, I'm looking for somebody who, for me, the biggest thing is work ethic. because we can all learn different skill set on the job. But if you don't have the right work ethic, I think from my perspective, that's not ideal. But the talent gap is real, at least when it comes to these roles, because again, we're not looking for one specific skill set, which is a pen tester, right? We're looking for somebody from strategy perspective who understands what a pen test is, but can also work with the business to help them prioritize it and help them with remediation efforts. They don't need to know the code, but they need to understand how code works. They should be able to talk to the businesses. They should have some soft skills when it comes to the engineers, when it comes to architects, when it comes to the product owners. So everybody understands the importance of what we're trying to do and sell that idea of this has to be done within the next week or within the next 1 year. And finding that talent has not been easy. And this is only the beginning, Pete. So I'm guessing if we have to grow the team by 25 people, it's going to be a bigger challenge than just one or two individuals that we're looking for right now.
So when you look at the talent gap industry wide on a larger scale, would you say that's really where the talent gap lies? Is it a lack of tech skills? Is it a lack of soft skills? It sounds like you might lean more towards that, or a combination of both.
It's the combination of both. And I've talked to some individuals who are super technical for this role, and they're great, but I can't put them in front of the quote unquote CIO for a business unit for them to sell the story on why we need MFA in 2023, right? I just would not feel comfortable putting those individuals in front of the CIO or asking for more budget when it comes to if we need to take logging to the next level, if we need to take identity to the next level, we need more dollars for that. And I don't feel comfortable putting the technical folks in front of those C-suite individuals asking for those needs. On the other side, I've talked to multiple individuals, Pete, that have I would say a lot of skill sets, but a lot of soft skills, but don't understand the technology part of security, which becomes an issue. So if I ask you, what all frameworks have you dealt with in the past, and if you're not able to list the frameworks, but you're generally in that area, that may not be good, because from what we're trying to do under strategy is we're trying to take all of the different frameworks that exist out there. Equifax has done a great job of combining all those frameworks and regulations and compliances and coming up with this short list of controls that people can just take and run with it. And we're trying to do that on our side to help us understand the baseline. But if you don't understand the technical bits on what are those controls and what are they required, so we can be a little bit more prescriptive to help with remediation within the company, your soft skills are not helping anybody at that point.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about being able to build a business case for more budget, maybe additional headcount, stuff like that. That's a problem I'm seeing a lot of folks running into right now in a down economy or going down economy. There's a lot of belt tightening and folks trying to do more with less. Executive teams are less likely to give budget to folks that they view as being in a cost center like security. So having folks that can build that business case is obviously very important, especially in a down economy. But it seems like a rare skill set. It seems like every potential client I talk to, it's kind of the same story. It's, well, we'd love to work with you. We just don't have the budget, or we can't add any additional headcount right now. There's been a hiring freeze, stuff like that. And I think oftentimes there's a short-term focus where people look at cutting costs in security because they view it as a cost center, when you almost have to sell a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, I feel like, sometimes, to executive teams to maybe fight for the budget that you need. I guess, could you distill down some successes that you've had in doing that, in fighting for additional headcount or budget for your team? Because that seems to be a common pain point right now.
100%, yes. So I'm a little bit lucky there, fortunate there that Alight has been able to prioritize security no matter what, right? Alight is a public company, so we are impacted by word on the street, we're impacted by our revenue, we're impacted by all those different things, which, to your point, is making the leadership think that we should have hiring freeze. And generally speaking, we do have hiring freeze at Alight. But when it comes to the security needs, if you're able to articulate that well, I know I have faith in my leadership that they will actually deliver on those needs. They will be able to get us more licenses. They will be able to get us more people. They'll be able to get us whatever needs to be done to keep the lights on from security perspective. One thing I've seen at Alight is that the security team is not necessarily being decreased. In fact, depending on the need, depending on what we're asking for, they're getting the right spotlight and they're getting the right approvals as needed. But Pete, it is an art, right? Because we're not necessarily. I don't want those individuals where they just come up and say, "Hey, I want 5 people."
Mm-hmm.
For what? Well, you wouldn't understand. I'm a security guy. I need 5 people. That's not going to work when we have to go to the board. For instance, we're asking for 5 times 200K, right? That's close to, well, that's $1 million. You can't just get that, right? So we're looking for, it's very hard to find those individuals that can help articulate that problem in a way that not just technical folks, but businesses are able to understand. It's almost like an art of risk quantification. And I know there are multiple tools for that, but I think helping people understand the art of possible through security tools, people, blah, 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 on where we can get versus what happens if we don't have that. And then that nobody wants to hear the B word, right? What happens if there's a breach? I think that painting that picture of where we can take it to the next level for maturity versus if we decrease or if we don't do enough, that breach that is always out there somewhere. That's the skill set that's needed the most in security at this point.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of ethereal to talk about a potential breach, like it's not a tangible thing. So it's hard to say, well, if we do this thing or we get this amount of budget, we're going to decrease our risk by X amount, which in turn means we're X less likely as a percentage
Correct.
to be breached. Like, have you been able to actually quantify that sort of thing to, make a better case?
I'm smiling because 6 years ago is when I started working in this, and I'll be honest with you, I still am nowhere close to completion. A lot depends on what previous work has been done within an organization to understand the risk landscape and the risk threshold, what they're ready to accept. If that doesn't exist, quantification is not going to help you. I say that because, for instance, I've been with firms where obviously I can't name them, but where some of the basic 101 items from just understanding of your risk just doesn't exist. So as part of strategy at this point, I just got voluntold last Friday that I'll be owning risk within our life, which is a great opportunity for me. But my first step would be, Pete, is to understand our current landscape, if it already doesn't exist, and also creating that baseline for what is our threshold. Once we have that, yes, then I can think about risk quantification. Like, every firm is different. I've been able to do this successfully in the past, but it's very simple math. Just take any of the Horizon data breach reports or any of those bigger, well-known companies that produce public reports, extract some of the things that make sense. For instance, what is the cost of a breach of one item? What type of data you have? How would that be impacted? If you're under HIPAA, what would a record cost? If you're under PCI, what would a record cost? It's a lot of math that goes behind it to help you understand what would be the impact of a breach if you lose 100 counts of health record. the litigation efforts, the legal costs, the reputation costs. Some of them have to be subjective, but for the most part, if you're objective with your numbers, you can get somewhere. But I don't think what I have right now is 100% give me the exact number every time I run the math. It's kind of like just playing around with it to help you understand, does this make sense for the most part, right? And as long as you're able to communicate that story with the big asterisk that this is not to scale, right? I think the message is received well. I know there are tools by MasterCard. I'm forgetting the name right now, but they can help you there. But there has to be some prerequisite work that has to be done. There has to be some understanding of what is your threshold before you can actually do some quantification. So I'll be doing this very soon, and maybe I'll just chat with you and say, hey, yes, we got this, or I'm still struggling.
Well, that's great to hear kind of how you do it or how you think about it. It reminds me a lot of recruiting, really. There's a science element to it, and then there's an art element to it. Science element, I've figured out our recruiting methodology, got it down pat. We got, templates for everything, and it works very well. But then there's also the art piece. When you're talking to humans, there's not always a cut and dry answer to what you should be doing in any given situation. And if we know anything, it's that people are fickle, and sometimes you have to use your emotional intelligence to read people and think and act on the fly. But I think having a good strategy for recruiting and hiring is super important. Having that science piece down, as long as you have that piece down, I think the art, if you're hiring the right people, the art piece kind of comes naturally as long as you have a good process. So, obviously you've done some hiring in the past. Have you gotten the hiring process down to a science, would you say? Or is it something you're, commonly looking at to make sure that, people are making it through the process and you're not getting a bunch of offers rejected?
That's a great question, Pete. So you are the professional when it comes to hiring, right? And I don't have a defined hiring process. I say that because, again, every situation is different. Every company has different cultures. But from my POV, a couple of things I generally look for is the work ethic bit. If I know that individual is going to probably go the extra mile because we're in the security world, right? Generally speaking, yeah, it's a 9 to 5 job, but there are days, there are weekends where, holy shit, something happened, and we have to take care of that, right? There is a client that is asking us for compliance against their own standard, which is not a public information, which is not necessarily posted yearly, right? They have their client compliance requirements listed in the contract, which, generally speaking, security people are not involved, and it's the legal team that's involved. But suddenly somebody realized we probably are not compliant, and now we need to do the extra mile over the weekend. That work ethic is important to me. Everything else kind of comes a little bit later because, again, from security skill set, I can teach that we have the right work ethic, right? Then from soft skill perspective, if you're able to work on that, I think that's going to be good. But those are the skills I'm looking for. And when it comes to the process itself, Pete, I think I personally don't believe in roundtables. I personally believe in one-on-one interactions because I think that's when you get the most out of those interactions. And not necessarily just the manager interactions. I would like to have one-on-ones between the individual, the potential candidate, and my current team, so they have a peer-to-peer conversation. That's not necessarily an interview. That's more like just so you understand what is the culture. They can be more comfortable. They can ask the right questions to the peers, potential peers, and get the right responses from those individuals. That has been it's a mixed bag, but that has been what I've been successful with in the past. I remember clearly I was hiring for a PCI role, and this individual at that time basically said, "Hey, I don't know PCI, but I know NIST, and I can work hard. If I understand NIST 853, I can use that as a way of understanding PCI baselines, and I can work with that." That's just been stuck in my head. It's been more than 8 years now. And just that mindset of, hey, I don't know this, but I can work hard and I can actually do some homework on this to get to the right level of understanding. I think that's an important skill.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you bring up a great point about having one-on-ones versus what I've sometimes heard referred to as panel interviews, and I've seen what that can do to a candidate psychologically speaking. You do not, I don't think, get the best out of people when you have them talking to 4 or 5 people at once. They feel like they're on the spot. They feel like it's kind of an inquisition. You just don't get a natural sense, I think, of their communication skills and their ability to relate to a person. It's like, yeah, there is value in being able to make a whole group feel like, they're impressed with you and stuff like that. There is value in that, but I don't think most people are wired that way, unless maybe they're salespeople, to entertain a whole group of people. And you could have a really good communicator that isn't necessarily really good at entertaining a whole group of people, but they'd be awesome one-on-one with a different business unit, non-technical people and stuff like that. And that makes me think of consultants. Like you mentioned, you came up through the consulting world, and that served you very well, having that client-facing ability. And now you work with internal clients and vendors and stuff like that. So I always tell folks, like, early on, if you can in your career, go work for a consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
You get so much experience so quickly, and you learn skills that you'll carry with you your entire career. And at some point, I think a lot of folks in consulting get burnt out, and then they're looking for a new role in industry, as they say, and often that's a pretty make sense move for them. One thing the consulting firms do relatively well, relative to the rest of the industry anyway, because their consultants are profit generating, it's easier for them to justify hiring at the entry level and building a training program and doing campus recruiting and stuff like that, because they know in 6 months to a year, they're going to get their money back out of these consultants. Where it becomes more challenging, though, it seems like on the internal side, is you need to, build a team of security professionals. You have limited budget, you have limited headcount. Maybe you had somebody leave and there's just a fire drill to get that person on board for that backfill. And in that case, it's very hard to build a business case for hiring at the entry level. You just don't have the time or the budget or the manpower to train this person. Have you ever successfully hired somebody at those junior and entry levels? And if so, how do you think you did it?
That's a great question, Pete. So I would agree with you that if you're hiring somebody fresh out of college or a few years out of college, you have to put in some time into them. And if it's not an easy situation, so if somebody actually just quit and then you're looking for a backfill, I would not be able to hire a relatively less experienced individual for that role. That's just not going to happen. We're looking for somebody that is turnkey, right? Especially when it comes to more demanding jobs like the SOC or IR, where we are looking for people to keep the machine running. It's not going to work out. In a blue sky scenario where we do have some time and we want to build a team in a way which is we're looking for successors in the future, we're looking for rising stars in the future, 100% agree with you. Looking for those individuals is the perfect session to help them get to know the security culture, the company culture, and how to grow within the team. Have I been able to do that? I've been able to do that, again, in blue sky scenarios where I had the time, the manpower, and the resources to help individuals train for analyst roles, train for associate roles, because they're generally the most hungry people, right? They want to work hard, they want to impress the managers, and they're brought out of college, so they have this sense of curiosity and they want to learn more. Those individuals are probably if you deal with them the right way, if you have a proper onboarding process, if you have a proper orientation program for them for the next 18 months or so, they're probably diamonds in the rough, and you want to make sure that you're working with those individuals to find the future leaders within your organization, to potentially find your successor within an organization. So I've been able to do that a few times when it was, again, the right background. A lot of colleges and universities these days, I know you're aware of this, Pete, but they have programs for cybersecurity, which is not a thing when I graduated, right? And that at least gives them an understanding of the difference between Windows and Unix, right? At least helps them understand what is a framework versus a compliance, what is an audit, and difference between risk and vulnerability, things like that. But they're still missing that practical experience, and all the things that they've learned when they put it into practice works out great. And again, blue sky scenario, I've been able to find those individuals who have been great assets to the company. But to your point, when it's a fire, when it's a very tactical issue, we're looking for turnkeys.
What about the idea of building a business case for hiring that way, and being more proactive in developing one of these programs where maybe you get a constant flow of candidates coming through every semester, every other semester? When you did hire at that level, did you have to go and ask for permission basically, or were you able to just kind of have some autonomy and just do it because you wanted to do it?
The good thing is that at Alight and Guardian, my past two industry experiences, they have this internship program. So these individuals, generally speaking, in their senior year, they join the firm for 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, and they are essentially for you to understand if they're a good fit for the future when they graduate. I've had some really good luck, Pete, where I had the autonomy to build my team, to start thinking about it a year from now, after the internship ends. How will I fit this individual, right? Now, I've talked to some really good interns that work for me, that work for my team. 6 to 12 weeks, they were able to prove themselves. And then I was able to build a case that I need this analyst, this associate for this function next year. I think just because I've been lucky that I'm having that 1 year time frame to think and then see where this individual fit, that has been super helpful. But I would not be able to do this if I didn't have that internship program, if I was not able to get my feet wet with that individual to understand if this person is the right candidate. Should we be putting in our time, energy, resources in hiring this person next year?
Yeah, so that's interesting. You almost got the intern first, and then you're able to open up the entry-level job afterwards. They gave you the business case, basically. Mm-hmm. You're like, this person's awesome. I know they've proven themselves to be capable for this particular role. Yeah, that's a great point about kind of trying before you buy. That's the great thing about internships. I think we need more apprenticeships in security. We basically need more pipelines. I was just at B-Sides Tampa, B-Sides St. Pete this weekend presenting, and there was a guy that asked questions, and he was about to graduate with his bachelor's in cybersecurity, but he had zero IT experience. He had the sense that he was just going to jump right into an entry-level role. I'm glad he attended my talk so I could kind of adjust expectations with him a little bit. He didn't realize that there's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people trying to break into the industry right now, all of which are his competitors. So, it's a wild time to try and be breaking into the industry. I think there's a reason we say breaking into, not just entering the industry. It's right. Because it is so difficult. So a lot of this podcast is really about how can we build that business case to create more of these openings. And we just need more of these openings. And I think we're all going to be better off in 5-10 years. I often say that I think the onus is on the consulting firms and the MSSPs that they're able to say, hey, these people are going to be profit generating. Every single MSSP, every single consultancy, I think, needs to have some sort of entry-level apprenticeship training program, internship. You try before you buy. You get people coming through the pipeline constantly, and I think they're in large part going to help us solve this whole talent gap thing. You've been in consulting yourself, so I'd imagine you kind of understand though that you can't just throw somebody on a project, and there's a lot of pushback sometimes from the client side to say, hey, this auditor or this pen tester, they're obviously very green. They don't know what they're doing. Have you ever had to deal with a consultant that you felt was maybe not quite up to snuff?
Yeah. And not just associates, consultants, and analysts, Pete. There are individuals who are not able to read the room and sense what's going on, right? Sense the tone. And I think you mentioned EQ maybe 20 minutes ago. That's very important. Forget the script that you have, right? And generally speaking, if you are an associate, you have a script on your laptop, and you're trying to follow that and ask the right questions and things like that. And that script is sequenced in a way that makes the most sense, from question one to 1A to 1B to 1C to 2, things like that. But real life, it just doesn't work like that, right? Once you get the network security team start talking, it's possible that they're going to jump from your question 1 to question 10. And if you're not able to correlate to what they're saying, you're going to go to question 2. You may be asking the redundant question, or you may be not catching on to what they're trying to say, and forget 2 to 9 questions. They're not relevant anymore because it's not part of the script anymore, and you need to jump into question X, which doesn't exist. I've had those individuals in the past, and obviously, at least when it comes to consulting, we've been lucky where it's not just the associates that's going to run with it, right? There's always a manager or a senior manager working as a tandem to make sure that there's air cover that's being provided, and that the more experienced individual is able to pivot the conversation in the right direction. Yes, and if that happens, then the client's generally saying, hey, this individual might not work out for us. They're too green, they pissed off the wrong person over there, and now the audit or the assessment that we were trying to do, it's not going to be successful, right? You always have to think about, and I'm guilty here, is when I was a consultant, I was only thinking about the consulting gig. I was only thinking about my work project, not necessarily thinking about the people I'm talking to and their daily operations. If this individual understands the daily operations, I think they can work it the right way and get the responses the right way. But if there's a mismatch there, which I have done that in the past myself, I was just completely wrong, and it did not go well. But yeah, it's very important to follow the direction of the client, follow the direction of the people you're talking to make sure that you're asking the right question, you're not just following a script.
Yeah, and if you're the consultant, or I'm thinking there's a lot of parallels there to being a recruiter. We basically have scripts and templates and stuff like that we work off of. And as somebody who's trained a few recruiters now, I can tell you it's so difficult to teach somebody, if not impossible, to teach somebody to be able to think on the fly and hold a lot of different things in their head at the same time. Basically, anybody can follow a script, but to be truly exceptional at what you do, you have to keep that script in mind, as well as adapt on the fly, depending on what the client or the candidate is telling you. And it's not an easy thing to do. Like I said, as somebody who's been training folks to do this, it's quite difficult. How do you identify people that have that ability to keep so much in their head at one time and adapt on the fly? Is that something that you can screen for in an interview process, do you think?
It's difficult. It's very difficult because here's the thing: there's a balance between asking the right questions, using the most out of the time you're getting with that individual, and not wasting their time. Right? They're taking time out of their schedule to talk to you, so you got to be respectful for that. It's not easy, Pete. It's something that that's where experts like you have to come in and help us and make sure that we are hiring the right individual, because that type of screening is important. You can ask a really verbose question just to test them out, but that might not go the way that you want it to go. And I think there's a dependence on professionals like you to help with that screening for sure.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's difficult to assess these things, and I've thought about it, and I can't really think of a methodology for doing so. It's more art than science when it comes to this sort of thing. You almost kind of have a feeling about somebody. It's funny, when I first started recruiting in our training program, really intense 2-week training program. One of the things they taught us was, if somebody's giving you a bunch of red flags, or they just seem off, or you just have a bad feeling about somebody, trust that gut instinct. It'll usually serve you pretty well. And there have been situations where I didn't trust it and I should have, and sure enough, it backfired. I think you have to be careful about that. Your gut instinct could be leading you astray in some cases. You could have biases you're not aware of. So I think it is important to think about these things, like, why is it specifically that this person is giving me bad vibes? What does that actually mean? But there's certainly an art to it. What are your thoughts on interview process, though? I think a lot of companies get the interview process wrong, the onboarding process wrong. Maybe expectations aren't set right in the beginning. And all of these things can really gum up a recruiting or a hiring situation. Like, do you have an ideal number of interview rounds, or a process for, getting somebody through?
3 to 4. That's all it takes. One as the hiring manager, one business, one peer, and generally that's sufficient. But depending on what role you're hiring for, so if you're looking for a director or senior director reporting into me, then the idea is that I want to make sure that my manager, the CSO, he also has a say, because it's possible when I'm out on vacation, Barrett, my CSO, has to interact with the new member that I'm just hiring. So there has to be a wipe check almost from the CSO or the CISO for that individual, because ultimately they are your lieutenants in general, and you want to make sure that they can represent you when you're out. Quite simply, yeah. Anything more than that, Pete, I feel like that's just not respecting the other individual's time, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I always say I think 2 to 3 rounds is really the sweet spot. You have enough to where you're properly screening somebody and they get a full sense of your organization without feeling like you're not doing your due diligence, which obviously is important, but not too long to where they're feeling like you said, you're wasting their time, or maybe there's too many hands in the cookie jar. It's going to be difficult to get decisions made within this company. If you have 6 or 8 interview rounds and they're still struggling to make a decision, that's a red flag to the candidate. Like, hey, maybe they don't agree on what they want, and that's not a good thing. Or maybe their their process, there's too much red tape, stuff like that. What are your thoughts on, and this is something I've seen in various disciplines from GRC to DFIR over the years, there's sometimes like a case study or a questionnaire, some sort of presentation that somebody will need to give. What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. There is a time and place for that. Generally speaking, this is for people who are relatively new to the industry, and you want to make sure that they know what they're talking about. So the case studies make sense. Case studies make sense when you're hiring 60 people, like what the Big Four do, right? They will send those individuals to their cyber university for 3 to 4 weeks, educate them on every single thing. Yes, case study at that point makes sense, but from where I am right now and the type of individuals I'm targeting, I'm looking for mostly senior people, right? Case studies are just too much work for a potential candidate, and that might just be just enough to push a really good candidate off the edge, because they're like, I don't want to do this. Like, I have a daily freaking job at this point, and I want to make sure that I'm focused over there. And then, for the most part, you should be able to gauge somebody's skill set and experience through those 3 or 4 hours that they're putting in the interviews. And at that point, case studies feel like a waste of time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think often what happens when you have too many hoops to jump through is you end up getting the people that are just willing to put up with the most versus the people that maybe are the best skill set match. Like the thought behind them is, okay, let's make sure we're really, grilling somebody essentially to make sure that they have the skills we need. And this is a good way to do it. It really puts them through the paces. But what ends up happening on the other end is, you get people dropping out of the process that, if they had done that study, they would have aced, but they didn't feel that they needed to because they thought they had showed in the previous interviews, hey, I obviously know what I'm talking about here. So yeah, that's one major roadblock I've seen in the industry between, good people and good jobs. I think a lot of times people take the path of least resistance. It's less applicable, I think, in this market where there's more candidates, there's less jobs. Employers kind of have a little bit more power now than perhaps they did a year ago. But yeah, if you put too many roadblocks in front of somebody, they're going to go to the other option that has less roadblocks. And in some cases, really in-demand skill sets like, DevSecOps or application security folks, cloud security folks, they're going to have 4 or 5 offers at once. So not only are they going to want to choose the best offer, all included, not just compensation, but best team fit, stuff like that. They're also going to be evaluating the process. Did it feel like this company was jerking me around? And did it feel like this company was excited to bring me on? So that's another thing I think more companies should do is when I say courting, because I think it's courting a candidate. Like you should be constantly selling to the people that you want to hire, not just, grilling them. Has that been a part of the interviews that you've done or the people that you've led, really telling them about the environment, telling them, fun stories and stuff?
Absolutely, yes. For the most part, those conversations happen at the peer level. That's why that 1 hour with a peer is super important. So they're asking all the right questions. But at times when people are asking me about the culture fit, I don't like to sugarcoat anything. I don't like to sell anything because I'm just going to give my perspective on the daily apps or the company's future or the company's culture. And that works perfect, right? And I don't want to say I'm too dry, that I'm not trying to sell it, but I'm just trying to make sure that, there's this excitement that they're coming in as a new individual, but also at the same time, that excitement is going to run away, right? And then it's going to be a little bit more regular. And we have to make sure that they understand what's going to happen 1 year from now. And that helps them understand if this is a good fit or not. Because first 1 year could be a great honeymoon period where they're enjoying every single thing. They're talking to the business, they're talking to product owners and things like that. But after that 1 year, if things become kind of dry and they don't enjoy that, then that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, it's so important you mentioned to kind of balance the selling aspect with expectation setting and, like you said, not sugarcoating things, sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly about your environment with somebody. And you're more likely to get a longer term match that way, just like you said. If somebody knows going in the downsides and they're okay with those downsides, but they're super excited about the upsides, that works out great. I hear from so many people that I talk to on the candidate side, the job, I'm 2 weeks into the job and already I can tell it's nothing at all like what was promised to me. There's no room for promotion. Team is toxic. It's just not where I want to be. And they're ready to be out the door as soon as they join this company when, that's not good for the company either. So they got somebody on board, but if somebody leaves abruptly, once they just started, they've had to tell all their runner-ups, hey, we have this position filled, and then that person leaves within 2 weeks, then they have to go back out to the market. And then all of a sudden, the whole hiring process is extended out who knows how long, number of months and stuff like that. And obviously retention becomes very important too, trying to keep people on board with your team long term. Any thoughts on, best practices for retention and keeping employees happy?
I'm glad you're asking that question, Pete, because I have seen, for the most part, people don't care. Managers don't care about this aspect. They're treating people like warm bodies that can easily be replaced. That's not the case. I think from my perspective, the biggest thing that keeps people engaged is, I don't want to use the word family because it's a cliche, but you're spending a lot of time with these individuals on a daily basis, right? At least 8 hours a day, you're talking to these individuals as your team members. And if that is not a good fit, it's not going to work out. But if you're only talking about work during those 8 hours, that's also sad. That's also not going to help you build relationships that are going to keep that individual engaged within the company. What we try to do, generally speaking, is every other Friday, we just try to block off the last 4 hours of the day just to chit chat. You can have a drink, you can have coffee, we can have whatever you want, and we just connect. And if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. It's not mandatory. Right? But the idea is that we're just connecting as humans, as individuals, to make sure that we all understand what's going on in their lives, because it's possible that someone's having a rough day. And if you don't understand why they're having a rough day, you're not going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And that will hurt you, and that will hurt that individual long term. So every other week, every other Friday, if you just connect with your teams, they feel valued, right? That the manager is giving them time. They feel like this is a good bonding time, especially since COVID. We're not necessarily going into the office. We don't have happy hours anymore, right? The virtual happy hours has been a good ammo for me, at least, in terms of making sure that the relationships are existing.
Very cool. Yeah. So relationships, that is true in my experiences. If somebody really enjoys working with their team, they're going to be a lot harder to pull out of that job for any recruiter that might be courting them at any given time. I think a lot of people think that it's all about money for people, and in some cases that is the case. People, usually it's the same people usually that are constantly jumping for money. I don't think most folks fall into that bucket. I think most people, if they're happy with their team, if they have flexibility, if their needs are met, their bills are paid, they don't have any desire to uproot their life and change everything up unless there's something, truly exceptional that crosses their desk. And, that's my goal as a recruiter, to only present people those opportunities that make the most possible sense, that are a big step up in some way. But yeah, if people are happy, you're good to go. So we're coming up on time here, Ash. One last question for you. Is there anything that we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
I think, and this is just my perspective, I think a lot of people, since past 18 months or so, have not prioritized training, and they're looking for CISSP, they're looking for CISA, CISM, everything on their resume. I think we need to give people some benefit of the doubt that they have the experience. And if you're looking for those certificates, those trainings, why don't you provide them, right? Maybe they've had a really, really, really tough job in the past 5 years, and they've not been able to focus on certifications. And when you talk to them during interviews, you should be able to understand that they have had a lot of incidents. They've had a lot of breaches in their past company, and because of that, they just never had the time to focus on certifications. I think those certifications are important, but if somebody doesn't have that, I don't think that's a big no for those individuals. I think if you're really looking for those certifications, you should provide that flexibility to your individuals. Hey, you have 1 year to do your CISSP, right? Once you join. I think that's one of the most important things, that, because my talent acquisition team was asking, hey, are you looking for any certifications? And I said, I don't care. If they're the right individual, they have the right experience, their CISSP number, license number is not going to help me. And if I really wanted it, I'm going to provide the training, and I'm going to provide the budget for that. So I think that's just one of those things that's just always stuck in my head. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, there's nothing that frustrates me more as a recruiter when I'll talk to a candidate. I know they're excellent. They don't check that box with that certification, and I'll send their resume to a hiring manager anyway and say, look, please trust me on this person. They're very well spoken. They've been working 70-hour weeks. They just haven't had time to get a cert, but they're really, really good at what they do, and you're going to love them. And then the answer sometimes is no. And it frustrates me to no end. I think in general, we need more open-minded hiring in the industry. And that's one of the primary causes of the talent gap. So yeah, great point, Ash. If folks want to reach out to you, find you online, what's the best way to do so?
LinkedIn, absolutely. Just search for me for Ash Vats and you'll find me.
Sounds good. Well, appreciate your time, Ash, and thanks everybody.